The man sitting across from me let out a soft sigh, his eyes fixed on me as he spoke. "You must be pretty lonely, huh?" For some reason, his words carried this weird undertone, and the corners of his mouth curled into an unsettling smile. Then he went on, "Someone as young as you, losing your husband so soon. Oh, sorry, we don't know for sure if he's gone, do we?" He picked up his teacup, taking a slow, deliberate sip. He kept talking. "I'm 60 now, still a bachelor. At my age, loneliness is just something you get used to. I don't really care about women anymore." He paused, his voice dropping low, almost like he was embarrassed, and let out a little chuckle. "But, sometimes at night when the wind howls and the windows rattle, I catch myself thinking it'd be nice to have someone there." He finished with this creepy look in his eyes, that smile of his stretching wider, mechanical, like it didn't belong on a human face. I grabbed my teacup, trying to hide the unease creeping up my spine, but my thoughts drifted to my husband. It's been a year since he disappeared. He loved hiking, always chasing the next mountain. Last winter, he told me he was going climbing, kissed me goodbye, and just never came back. The police and local fire department threw everything into the search, huge teams combing the mountains, but they found nothing. Not a single trace. The cops told me he probably had an accident, but I couldn't accept it. I still hold on to this hope that one day he'll walk through the door, wearing the same clothes, flashing that familiar smile, saying, "I'm back." But a year's passed, and I'm still waiting. Now, I live alone in this old 2-story house my husband picked out. He was obsessed with antiques, hated modern apartments, always said he wanted a place with history. So we moved into this creaky old house in the suburbs, about an hour's drive from his work. The man sitting in front of me, sipping his tea, is our landlord. He lives in a big house behind ours. Doesn't seem to have a job, but keeps busy as the neighborhood association president, always volunteering or organizing community stuff. Every time I see him, he's got that same eerie smile plastered on his face. He reached for the envelope with the rent money, his eyes scanning me up and down. "Everything okay around here?" he asked. I shook my head, saying no, everything's fine. "A woman living alone, that's dangerous," he said, his tone almost too serious. "This time of year, break-ins and thefts are common. Make sure you lock your doors and windows tight." He stared at my face a little too long, then let out that weird laugh again. It made my skin crawl, like a cold, slimy snake wrapping around my neck. I shivered despite myself. Truth is, lately, some strange things have been happening at home. It started around January, nothing major at first, just these subtle feelings. Sometimes I'd get this sudden chill, like someone was watching me from the corner of the room. Or I'd sense something off, like the house had a presence that didn't belong. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination, but it started getting weirder. One day, I came home from work and noticed the magazines on the table, ones I'd left scattered the night before, were neatly stacked. A dirty soup mug I'd forgotten to wash was clean and sitting in the sink. For a moment, I had this crazy thought. What if my husband came back? I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's a reason I thought that. I sleep in a tatami room, and because I miss him so much, I still lay out his old bedding next to mine. One morning, I woke up and glanced at his side of the bed. The sheets, which no one had touched all night, were crumpled, like someone had been lying there. When I touched them, they were still faintly warm. Then I noticed the pillow. It smelled like the hair tonic he used to love. I'd washed that pillowcase a million times since he disappeared, so there's no way that scent should have been there. Shocked, I ran to the bathroom to check the shelf by the mirror. His razor, toothbrush, and hair tonic were always up on the top shelf. But that day, the hair tonic bottle was on the second shelf. Someone had moved it. I've never believed in ghosts, so my mind kept circling back to one thought. Could my husband really be back? But deep down, part of me wasn't so sure. So I decided to install 3 security cameras, one in the bathroom, one in the living room, and one in the bedroom. Every morning before work, I checked to make sure they were running, then head out. For 3 days, everything seemed normal. But on the fourth day, I came home, opened my laptop with this nervous knot in my stomach, and started reviewing the footage. The first day's recordings were fine, nothing unusual in any of the 3 spots. But on the second day, as I fast-forwarded through the footage, something caught my eye. Around 4 p.m., the bathroom camera showed a figure standing at the sink. I paused and switched to normal speed, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was the landlord. He was standing there, back to the camera, wearing my husband's favorite shirt. He was staring into the mirror, smearing my face cream on his cheeks, then grabbing my husband's hair tonic and rubbing it into his thinning hair. He stood there, admiring himself, before walking out of frame. I thought that was it, but it wasn't. I switched to the bedroom footage. Around 11 p.m., the camera caught me in my pajamas, laying out the bedding. I was feeling lonely, so I spread out my husband's bedding too, side by side with mine. After taking a sleeping pill, I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and passed out. But then at just past 2 a.m., something chilling happened. A head appeared at the bottom of the frame. I zoomed in. It was him, the landlord, again. This time, he was wearing a tracksuit, creeping up to my bed. He lay down next to me, staring at my face as I slept. Then he gently placed his hand over mine, pressed his cheek against my cheek, and just stayed there, watching me. That creepy smile spread across his face again. This went on for over an hour until, around 3 a.m., he suddenly sat up, looking panicked, and crawled out of frame. I was shaking as I watched it all. I called the police immediately. But there's one thing about that bedroom footage that I can't wrap my head around, something that haunts me more than anything else. The tracksuit the landlord was wearing, it was identical to the one my husband had on the day he disappeared. That outfit vanished with him. So how the hell was the landlord wearing it? The thought sent a cold, creeping dread through me, and I couldn't shake the horrifying possibilities it brought up. When I was a kid, my mom was deep into this weird religion. It wasn't just about going to gatherings. They had this master who'd give advice on everyone's problems, help with tough decisions, or even claim to heal illnesses with some kind of supernatural power. The group felt pretty big. They had meeting spots all over the place. Every month, my mom would drag me and my little brother along, usually by train. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. People would just hang out, chat, and the master would step in to solve their issues. Like, if someone was stressing about work, he'd do this special ritual to see their future and tell them what to do to make life go smoothly. Honestly, the vibe felt kind of positive back then, like everyone was just trying to help each other out. But then something changed. I don't know what happened, but around one particular year, I started feeling like I was falling apart. I went from being this bubbly, outgoing kid to someone who barely spoke. I was moody all the time, just stuck in this constant funk. At school, if a teacher called on me, I'd freeze up like my whole body turned to ice, and I couldn't get a word out in front of the class. Sometimes, out of nowhere, my heart would start racing. I'd break out in a sweat, and my chest would get so tight I could hardly breathe. One time, it got so bad that my vision went black, and pain shot through random parts of my body, arms, legs, everywhere. It felt like I was dying, trapped in this overwhelming, bone-deep fear. The episodes would pass pretty quickly, but the dread lingered, like I was always waiting for the next one to hit. I started dreading school, begging to stay home. I told my mom what was going on, hoping she'd help, but instead of letting me take a break, she just told me to keep up my normal routine. A few days later, she took me out of the house, and I thought finally she's taking me to a doctor. I was so relieved, thinking I'd get some kind of treatment. But nope, she brought me to one of those religious gatherings. There, the master performed this bizarre ritual on me. He waved his hands around in these weird gestures while I sat cross-legged on the floor, feeling miserable. The other members gathered around, praying for me, and the whole thing felt creepy, like something out of a bad movie. As a kid, it was the first time I felt genuinely scared in that place, but I didn't know how to speak up. When it was over, The master gave me this big fake smile and told me to trust him. He'd drive out whatever was making me sick. Honestly, that smile just made my skin crawl. It was creepy and gross. Later, I accidentally saw my mom hand over a wad of cash to him, like some kind of donation. That's when my view of the place shifted. It went from this warm, positive community to something dark and unsettling. The next day at school, I passed out from heat stroke and ended up in the nurse's office. A teacher took me home afterward. My mom was out running errands, so I was alone, lying in bed on the second floor, feeling worse by the minute. I decided to take a shower to cool off, but as I headed down the stairs, that awful feeling hit me again. My heart started pounding, and this intense fear took over. My vision went black, pain shot through my body, and I felt like I was losing control. Next thing I knew, I was stumbling, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctor said I'd fallen down the stairs and had a mild concussion. Apparently, my little brother came home, found me sprawled out, and ran to the neighbors, yelling that I was dying. They called an ambulance. The doctor asked me about my symptoms, and they set me up with some follow-up appointments. He also gave my mom a stern talking to, saying, if that religion could cure people, we doctors wouldn't have jobs. Think about your kid's health. A few days later, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that caused panic attacks. I got out of the hospital, but what freaked me out most was what my mom said to me first thing. See, this happened because your faith isn't strong enough. It's your fault. Even though it's been years, and I've long since forgiven her, that moment, her expression, her words, still haunts my dreams sometimes. My panic attacks eventually went away, but I learned something back then. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the illness itself, but the extreme beliefs people hold on to. I once had this girlfriend who was crazy jealous. At first, she was sweet and caring, but as time went on, she started showing these weird behaviors. She was always down, carrying this heavy loneliness I couldn't quite get. When we officially started dating, I realized those dark moods were becoming a problem in our relationship. Every time my phone buzzed, she'd pounce, asking who was calling, what we talked about. It was like this every single time. She'd grill me nonstop, as if every notification was some kind of threat. On weekends, she'd insist I stay with her, and if I couldn't because of work, she'd blow up my phone, texting every few minutes to ask where I was, what I was doing. It wasn't just that. She was paranoid about me talking to any other woman. Saying hi to a neighbor? No. Chatting with a female cashier? Forbidden. I started noticing that my close relationship with my sister was slipping away because of her behavior. It was getting to the point where it felt dangerous. So I reached out to her family for help. Her parents, though, just gave me this cold response. Our daughter's been a mess since her last boyfriend left. She calmed down a bit after you two got together, but she's really struggling. Please be patient with her. That hit me hard. They wanted me to keep putting up with it to not make things worse for her. I even talked to a friend who's a cop, but he just shrugged and said, relationship problems? Unless someone's dead, we don't get involved. I couldn't keep living like that. So one night, I decided to be straight with her and break things off. We were at her apartment, and when I told her, it was like she turned into someone else. She lunged at me, screaming like a wild animal. I pushed her back, trying to stay calm, but she kept thrashing, clawing at my face, completely unhinged. She fell, scrambled to her feet, and bolted for the kitchen. A cold dread hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't think twice, I ran. As I waited for the elevator, heart pounding, I heard her footsteps getting closer. She came barreling out, barefoot, clutching a knife. The elevator wasn't coming fast enough, so I sprinted for the stairs, flying down them as fast as I could. My heart racing so hard I thought it had burst. She was right behind me, closing in. I was running out of steam when I suddenly ducked down and kicked out hard. She tripped, crashed to the ground, and the knife flew out of her hand. I kicked it away and kept running until I hit the parking lot. I jumped into my car, floored it toward the exit, but as I turned a corner, the passenger door was yanked open. Her screams were deafening, like thunder in my ears, as she clung to the door, shrieking like a banshee. My heart was about to give out, but I couldn't stop. I slammed the gas pedal, speeding up until she finally let go. I tore through the streets, ignoring every traffic rule, tears streaming down my face without me even realizing it. That night, I went straight to my parents' place and never saw her again. Weeks passed with no word from her. I was worried she might have done something drastic, so I asked a friend to check on her. He came back saying she was doing fine, like nothing had happened. I thought it was finally over. But then one evening, I got back to my apartment, ready to make dinner, and found a package in my fridge. My pulse quickened. I had a bad feeling about it, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a letter and the pair of shoes I'd left at her place, torn to shreds. The sight of it sent fear crawling up my spine, sweat dripping down my forehead. I froze, then forced myself to open the letter. But it wasn't a letter. Instead, hard, brittle objects spilled into my hand, like petals scattering. When I realized they were her fingernails, ripped from her fingers, I nearly screamed, flinging them away in a panic. I grabbed my phone to call a friend, but when I picked up the landline, it was dead. I checked, the cord had been cut clean through. Shaking, I reached for my charging cell phone, but the second I touched it, rang. Her name lit up the screen. My stomach dropped, and I hurled the phone across the room, collapsing to the floor, legs too weak to stand. Then I heard it, the sound of the front door's lock turning. The door creaked open slowly, and there was her voice, that familiar, terrifying voice, saying, "I'm coming in." I was hit hard by a nasty cold, so I called in sick to work. From the moment I woke up, I was stuck in bed, my body burning up with a fever over 39 degrees Celsius. For someone like me, who usually runs a bit cooler than most, it was brutal. Lying there, I couldn't help but wonder if this was it. Maybe I was just going to kick the bucket like this. My whole body felt like it was on fire, but at the same time, I was shivering uncontrollably, wave after wave of chills wrecking me. And to top it all off, as a heavy smoker, I was dying for a cigarette. But I was too weak to even drag myself out of bed. Smoking while lying there felt pathetic, like I was some kind of useless wreck, so I didn't. The nicotine withdrawal hit me hard, making me antsy and irritated, and combined with the pain of the fever, I couldn't sleep. I just kept tossing and turning, restless as hell. In the middle of all this frustration, I noticed something off about my wardrobe. The door, which is always shut tight, was now slightly ajar, just a tiny crack. I got a bit of OCD, so that kind of thing bugs me. Dragging my heavy, aching body out of bed, I shuffled over to close it. But as I got closer, I swear I saw something, a woman's figure, just faintly through the gap in the door. I was so out of it, head pounding and foggy from the fever, that I didn't think much of it. I shut the wardrobe door and crawled back to bed, collapsing onto the mattress. But as I kept tossing and turning, I glanced over and saw it again. The wardrobe door was open, just a sliver, like it had popped back open on its own. Wrapped in my blanket, I stared at it, thinking, "Come on, not today. Please don't mess with me today." I kept my eyes locked on that gap, and then, bam, there it was. A woman's face, pale as death, floating in the air. Her lips were moving slightly, like she was trying to say something, but her voice was so faint I couldn't make it out. I tried to read her lips, but with my fever frying my brain, I couldn't figure out what she was saying. Honestly, I was too exhausted to deal with whatever creepy nonsense this was. So I just pulled the blanket over my head, pretending I didn't see her. Even with the blanket covering me, blocking out that ghostly face, her voice started getting clearer. It was still too soft to understand, but it was there like a nagging whisper. It drove me nuts, that constant muttering, so I grabbed my headphones, popped them on, and cranked up some music to drown it out and distract myself. After a while of tossing and fighting the noise, I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, it was pitch black outside. The moonlight barely crept into the room, casting faint outlines of everything. I looked over at the wardrobe. It was closed tight, just like it's supposed to be. Staring at it, I wondered if everything from earlier was just a fever dream. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Or maybe ignoring creepy stuff like that is the best way to handle it. Whatever, I thought, as long as it's gone, I'm good. But the second I let my guard down and pulled off my headphones, a woman's piercing scream blasted in my ears. It kept repeating over and over, loud and furious. Why did you dare ignore me? Why did you dare ignore me? Why did you dare ignore me? That moment burned into me, and ever since, I've learned one thing for sure. When it comes to spooky stuff, you better not take it lightly. Back when I was in college, I moved into this old, run-down apartment. The rent was dirt cheap, so I couldn't complain too much, but man, it was ancient. Not long after I settled in, something weird started happening. One night, I was chilling in bed, flipping through some comics, when I heard this thump, thump, thump sound. At first, I figured it was just the neighbors moving stuff around or something. You know, typical apartment noise. But as time went on, I realized it wasn't that simple. The sound wasn't random. It was coming from the wall, like someone was deliberately knocking. It'd go on for about 10 or 15 minutes, always with a steady rhythm. It didn't happen every night, so at first, I didn't think much of it. Just a minor annoyance, right? But then I started noticing a pattern. The knocking only happened on Friday nights, always starting at the same time and stopping at the same time, like clockwork. Once I picked up on that, it started getting under my skin. There was something creepy about how predictable it was, and I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. My apartment was an end unit, so the only person who could have been knocking was the neighbor on the other side of that wall. Someone had moved in a few days after me, but I'd never met them. I'm kind of a shy guy, so I wasn't about to go knock on their door and start trouble. I just put up with it for a while, but one Friday night, I was trying to focus on some homework, and right on cue, the thump, thump, thump started up again. I pressed my ear to the wall, and sure enough, it was coming from the other side, steady and deliberate. It was driving me up the wall, pun intended. I got so pissed off that I slammed my foot against the wall a couple of times, hard enough to make a loud bang. For a second, it was quiet. Then, out of nowhere, the neighbor fired back with these heavy, aggressive sounds way louder than before. It was like they were saying, "Oh, you want to play?" That was it. I was fuming. I stormed out of my apartment, marched over to their door, and rang the bell. The door swung open, and there was this guy standing there, looking tired, his eyes all dull and sunken. "What do you want?" he asked, clearly annoyed. I didn't hold back. "What's your deal, man? Why do you keep banging on the wall?" He shot back, just as irritated. "It's your room making all the noise." What am I supposed to do? Just sit there and take it? I froze for a second. "What noise?" I said. He rolled his eyes and practically dragged me into his apartment. "Listen for yourself," he said, pointing to the wall we shared. I pressed my ear against it, and sure enough, there it was. Thump, thump, thump. Same rhythm, same sound. I was speechless. I turned to him and said, "Look, I live alone. That's not me making that noise." He just stared at me, didn't say much, and told me to stop assuming it was him. We both ended up apologizing, feeling kind of awkward, and I went back to my place. But the whole thing was so bizarre, it stuck with me. The next day, I told my friend about it. He was super curious and insisted on coming over the next Friday to check it out. So that night we hung out in my room, chatting and waiting. Right on schedule, the knocking started. Thump, thump, thump. My friend's face changed. He looked at me, dead serious, and said, "Dude, you need to move out. Like now." I asked him why, but he just clammed up, looking like he didn't want to talk about it. He was itching to leave, but I kept pushing until he finally pointed at the wall. "Look over there," he said. "Don't you see that weird dark spot?" I squinted, and sure enough, there was a noticeable dark stain on the wall I'd never noticed before. My friend insisted we step outside to talk. In the hallway, he asked if I knew what that spot was. I shook my head, totally clueless. Then he dropped the bomb. He said, "When the knocking started, I saw something. There was a woman sitting in front of that wall. She kept slamming her head against it, right where that spot is. Her forehead was bleeding, blood running down her face, and she just kept going. I felt my stomach drop. Sweat started pouring down my face, and I was too freaked out to even go back into my apartment. That image, her smashing her head against the wall, leaving that stain, explained the knocking. I couldn't unsee it in my head, and I sure as hell wasn't sticking around to find out more." When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot. One of those moves landed us in this old apartment with a super simple layout. It had this long hallway running down the right side, with all the rooms on the left. At the end of the hallway were the kitchen and the bathroom. The thing about this place was, the hallway had no windows, so it was always pitch black unless you kept the lights on. We left the hallway light on all the time because, without it, that place was creepy as hell. During our stay there, a bunch of weird stuff happened, but I'm going to tell you about one incident that really stuck with me. My room was the first one, right by the front door. To get to the bathroom, I had to walk down that long, narrow hallway. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, probably around 2 or 3 a.m., needing to pee. I stumbled out of my room and flicked the 2 light switches by the door. One for the light right outside my room and one for the hallway. The light by my door clicked on, no problem, but the hallway stayed dark as a tomb. I figured the bulb must have burned out or something. Whatever, I didn't care too much. I just wanted to pee and get back to bed. So I shuffled down the dark hallway, feeling my way along the wall until I reached the end. I flipped on the kitchen light, which lit up the bathroom, and went in to do my business. After I was done, I grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, turned off the light, and started heading back to my room. But as I stepped into the pitch black hallway, I saw something. A dark shadow zipped past me fast, like it shot from the front door straight into my room. I froze for a second, heart pounding. I was sure I'd seen it clear as day. Curiosity got the better of me, so I hurried back to my room to check it out. When I got there, the room looked normal. Nothing under the desk, nothing in the wardrobe. There weren't many places to hide in there, so I started thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Just as I was about to brush it off, I heard this creepy giggling behind me. Hee hee hee. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, and the sound stopped instantly. My stomach started twisting, and I was getting freaked out. I bolted to my bed and dove under the covers, trying to calm myself down. But before I could even catch my breath, I heard it again, a soft voice whispering, "I'm here. Over here. Hee hee. I'm right here." My blood ran cold. The voice was coming from under my bed. I realized I'd screwed up. I checked everywhere else, but forgot the bed had this empty space underneath, big enough for someone to crawl into. My heart was racing, but I had to know. I slowly peeked out from under the blanket and, with every ounce of courage I had, leaned over to look under the bed. There he was, an old man, completely naked, lying on his side, staring right at me. His eyes were huge, practically bulging out of his head, and his face had this gross, unsettling vibe. We locked eyes for a few seconds, and then his lips curled into a slow, creepy smile. "Hee," he said. "Little buddy, you found me. You caught me." Then he let out this disgusting, leering laugh and started sinking into the floor, like he was melting away or something. I watched frozen until he was completely gone. Only then did I let out a shaky breath, my whole body trembling. I lay back in bed, heart still pounding, thinking, thank God he's gone. The idea of that creepy old perv ghost staying under my bed all night would have kept me up forever. I mean, imagine if he tried to push up through the mattress or something. That would have been a nightmare I couldn't handle. Back when I was working, I used to take friends and clients to this fancy club for drinks and fun. One day, I got a text from a girl I was pretty close to who worked there. It read, "Miss you. My birthday's the day after tomorrow, and I'm so excited to spend it with you. I'll be waiting at the club." I sighed thinking, man, what a hassle. But she was someone I cared about, so I figured I'd grab a gift and round up some friends to make a night of it. After work, I swung by a department store near my place and picked out a nice piece of jewelry. As I was leaving the store, heading out the main entrance, my stomach suddenly twisted with a sharp, stabbing pain. Damn, I thought, is this some kind of divine punishment for blowing money like a reckless idiot? The pain eased up after a moment, and I broke out in a cold sweat but felt okay enough to keep going. On my way home, I grabbed a cold beer from a convenience store and started sipping it as I walked. Big mistake. A few gulps in, my stomach cramped up again. Way worse this time. I was like, oh crap, this is bad. I needed a bathroom stat. I must have looked ridiculous, hunched over, clutching my gut, frantically scanning for a place to go while passers probably thought I was about to make a fool of myself. I didn't care about the stairs. I was in survival mode. Finally, I spotted a park nearby, and in a dark corner, there it was, a public restroom. I sprinted toward it, my mind racing. Am I gonna make it? Oh God, it's gonna come out. By some miracle, I reached the restroom without disaster. It had 3 stalls, and I was praying at least one was free, because if they were all taken, my life was over. I rushed to the last stall, saw the door was open, bolted inside, locked it, and barely made it onto the toilet before everything let loose. I was so relieved, thinking, thank God I made it. Losing it on the street would have been no joke. But seriously, why was I having such a rough day? Was this really some kind of cosmic payback? As I sat there, catching my breath and pondering life's big questions, I heard the door of the stall next to me close and lock. Then came this wet, splattering sound. Poor guy, I thought he must have been in a hurry too. I was almost done and reached for the toilet paper when the guy in the next stall started knocking on the partition. A goofy-sounding voice said, "Hey, sorry, you got any paper over there?" I felt bad for him. Running out of toilet paper is the worst. So I grabbed a decent amount and passed it under the gap. He snatched it quick, and I went back to wiping up. Just as I finished, the guy knocked again, sounding a bit more desperate. "Sorry, man, you got any more paper?" I rolled my eyes, thinking, seriously? That wasn't enough. But whatever, I grabbed an even bigger wad this time and passed it under. This time he yanked the paper so hard it pulled my hand, and I had to jerk it back. What a jerk, I thought, rubbing my hand where it got scraped. Rude as hell. I pulled up my pants, buckled my belt, and flushed. Then he knocked again. "Sorry, you got any more paper?" Now I was pissed. This guy was pushing it. I decided to ignore him, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. But he wouldn't quit. The knocking got louder, more frantic, and it started moving, like it wasn't just on a partition anymore, but on my stall door. He kept saying, "You got any more paper?" over and over. I was like, is this guy nuts? I stayed quiet, hoping he'd stop, but then the door started shaking like someone or something was slamming into it, hands and feet pounding like crazy. The voice got louder, angrier, almost growling. "You got any more paper? You got any more paper?" I was done. My blood was boiling, so I flung the door open and yelled, "Are you screwing with me, man?" The second I opened the door, it was dead silent. Nobody was there. The whole restroom was empty. I stood there shocked, looking around the quiet park outside. Not a soul inside. Feeling a mix of confusion and dread, I went back in to wash my hands. As I was finishing up, I heard the middle stall's lock click open. "Gotcha, I thought you hid back in there, huh?" I marched over, ready to give this guy a piece of my mind, and shoved the door open. But the stall was empty. Except for one thing, the toilet was overflowing with toilet paper, piled up like a freaking mountain. My skin crawled, and I bolted out of there, goosebumps all over. As I reached the exit, I heard it again, that same pathetic voice, coming from behind me, knocking on the partition. "Hey, sorry, you got any more paper?" Even now, thinking about it gives me chills. I'm pretty sure it was just a dream, but it still scares the hell out of me. Back when I was a broke college student, I lived alone in this super old apartment. It was a tiny place. When you walked in, there was a narrow kitchen on the right, a bathroom on the left, and just a small six-mat room for everything else. One night, I got home late, around 1 a.m., totally wiped out. I was too lazy to shower, so I just flopped onto my bed and started watching TV. I must have been exhausted because I passed out mid-show, still sprawled out with the TV blaring. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, the room was pitch black. It took me a minute to shake off the grogginess and realize what was weird. I'd fallen asleep with the TV on, so why was it off now? And the room's light, which I definitely didn't touch, was off too. My head was pounding, and I was annoyed, muttering to myself about how much of a pain it was to get up and deal with this. I tried to close my eyes and go back to sleep, but then I heard it, a strange noise coming from somewhere in the room. It sounded like a faint, high-pitched squeaking, like a bat or some small animal, but weak, like it was on its last legs. I froze, my heart starting to race. What the hell is that? I thought. Slowly, I opened my eyes, trying to figure out what was going on. The room was so dark, it was hard to make anything out, but as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something even creepier. The TV wasn't just off, it was like the whole room felt wrong, like there was some eerie vibe hanging in the air. I decided I had to get up and check things out. The squeaking noise kept going, faint but persistent, echoing around me. I scanned the room, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from, and that's when my eyes landed on the front door. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a mailbox slot at the bottom of the door, and sticking out of it was a slender hand. A woman's hand with long fingers and bright red nail polish, wiggling and twitching like it was alive. It was reaching toward the doorknob, like it was trying to turn it. I stood there, completely paralyzed, as the hand made this loud, shrill squeak, squeak, squeak sound. Then it fumbled with the knob, twisting it 2 or 3 times before suddenly yanking back through the slot and disappearing. I was stuck in place, my mind blank with panic. It took a few seconds for me to snap out of it. I jumped up, heart pounding, and ran to the door. I flung it open and looked outside, but there was nothing. No one in the hallway, no sound, just dead silence. Shaking, I closed the door and locked it tight. That's when I noticed something else. Near the mailbox slot, there were scratch marks, deep, jagged lines, like someone had clawed at the door. It made my stomach churn, and I felt this overwhelming mix of nausea and fear. I couldn't stay there after that. I packed up and moved out as soon as I could. Every time I've told this story to friends, they always tease me, saying it was probably some ex-girlfriend I dumped, coming back with a grudge, or some woman who hated my guts. But honestly, I can't think of anyone in my life who'd have that kind of resentment toward me. So I tell myself it was just a dream. That's the only way I can keep myself from freaking out about it. Back when I started junior high, there was this kid in my class named Abang who walked with a limp. He sat right next to me, and since it was the start of the school year, nobody really knew each other yet. Most of the class gave him weird looks because of how he walked, and they didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for him. But I've always been the kind of guy who likes hanging out with the so-called weirdos or the kids who get left out, so I hit it off with Abang pretty quick. I'm a chatty, outgoing type, and before long, we were buddies. Over time, my upbeat vibe must have rubbed off on him because he started opening up, getting friendlier with the rest of the class. Eventually, he was just one of the gang, laughing and joking with everyone. But even as we got closer, whenever I asked him why he walked the way he did, he'd just give this mysterious little smile and say, "I'll keep that to myself. Let's just say I'm working hard to make my legs stronger." He never spilled the beans, no matter how much I bugged him. That is, until one day in class when our teacher made us all give presentations about a memorable personal experience. I didn't have much to work with, so I told a dumb joke that got the whole class, and even the teacher cracking up. The teacher let me slide, barely. Then it was a Bang's turn, and he told a story that stuck with me ever since. Here's what he said, pretty much word for word. Hey, everyone. I know you've all been curious about my leg, and I've never really told anyone what's up with it. Today, I'm going to share that story. Ever since I was little, my parents were always busy with work. Even on weekends, they take turns going in for overtime. So, unlike a lot of you, I didn't grow up with tons of family trips or outings. My dad especially was always grinding, putting in long hours to make sure we had a good life. Because of that, me and my older brother didn't get to spend much time with him. We weren't super close, but one weekend something different happened. My mom had to go to work, so it was just me, my brother, and my dad at home. Dad was out on the balcony smoking, and out of nowhere he turned to us and asked, "You guys want to go out and have some fun with me?" It had been forever since we hung out with him, so we were pumped, shouting, "Yeah, let's go." Dad's face lit up like he was just as excited as we were. We started tossing around ideas about where to go, and we settled on hitting the beach. So, Dad drove us out to the coast. That day was pure magic. We splashed around in the water, ate ice cream in bento boxes on the sand, and just talked. We told him about funny stuff that happened at school, and he shared stories from when he was a kid. The three of us were laughing our heads off, having the best time. It was one of those perfect days, but good times always fly by too fast. By the afternoon, we were all wiped out. On the drive back, I was so sleepy, fighting to keep my eyes open because I didn't want the day to end. I was happy being with Dad, but I couldn't stay awake. I drifted into this weird half-asleep, half-awake state. That's when I noticed Dad at the wheel. He looked exhausted, like he was nodding off. I tried so hard to snap out of it to say something to wake him up, but before I could, I heard this loud honk from up ahead. A huge truck was barreling straight toward us. I didn't even have time to react. Everything went black. I don't remember feeling any pain, just this foggy, out-of-it haze. I vaguely recall being loaded into an ambulance, but I passed out again on the way. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital, surrounded by nurses rushing me into what I think was an operating room. Then I blacked out completely. While I was out, I had this bizarre dream. It was a normal morning, and my brother and I were heading to school like always. As we walked down the street, I saw our family car coming toward us. It pulled up right in front of us and stopped. The window rolled down, and there was Dad looking kind of sad. He leaned out and asked, "You guys want to go have some fun with me?" Me and my brother exchanged a look and without saying anything, just shook our heads. Dad sighed, looking disappointed, and said, "All right." He got back in the car, started it up, and drove toward us. My brother yanked me out of the way, but the car still clipped my left leg just a little. We stood there on the road, watching Dad drive off until he disappeared at the end of the street. When I woke up in the hospital, my mom was there, looking worried sick. My whole body hurt like hell, and my left leg was all bandaged up, full of pins or whatever they used to hold it together. A doctor came in and told us my brother had woken up too, but Dad, who'd been in another operating room, didn't make it. A Bang paused here and rolled up his pant leg. There was a long, gnarly scar running down his leg. He continued, "So this is my leg now. After the accident, I've been working hard to make it stronger, more flexible. Yeah, it was a tragedy, but I don't regret that day. Me, my brother, and my dad made this amazing memory at the beach, and I'll always hold on to that. The only thing that bugs me is that dream. If I'd said yes to going with Dad in that dream, would I still be standing here telling you all this story?" This happened over a year ago, during the sweltering summer of 2024, when we still lived in our old house on the outskirts of Atlanta. At the time, I was a construction engineer working day shifts, coming home exhausted, while my wife, a preschool teacher, spent most of her days at home with our two young children. We had an 8-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. Life was simple, Nothing out of the ordinary. Our home was a two-story house with a damp basement used to store random things. Old suitcases, cardboard boxes, and a couple of broken bicycles. We bought it cheap because it was old, built back in the 1970s, but I thought it was fine. I'd installed a few security cameras at key spots, the front door, kitchen, and upstairs hallway, mostly to keep an eye on the kids when they played alone. The first night we heard the strange noise was around 1 a.m. I was fast asleep when I suddenly woke up to a shuffling sound coming from the basement, like someone dragging something across the concrete floor. My wife woke up too, gripping my hand tightly, whispering, "Did you hear that? There's something down there." I lay still listening. Yes, there it was, faint but unmistakable. It sounded like soft footsteps or something falling. I figured it was probably a stray cat that had gotten in. There were lots of wild cats in the neighborhood, or maybe just mice. "Don't worry, it's nothing," I said, trying to calm her. "I'll check it out tomorrow." I pulled the blanket up and went back to sleep. We didn't think much of it. Old houses make strange noises, wind rattling windows, pipes creaking, things like that. The next morning, I went down to the basement for a quick look. Nothing seemed off except a few cardboard boxes slightly out of place, but I assumed I just misremembered their positions. The rest of the day passed normally: work, school drop-offs, dinner, TV, and bed. But on the second night, the noise came again, louder this time, around 2 a.m. It wasn't just shuffling anymore. It sounded like a door opening or a drawer being pulled open gently. My wife jolted awake and shook me. "Honey, I'm sure it's not a mouse this time. It sounds like someone is rummaging around." I sat up, heart pounding, but tried to stay calm. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and a baseball bat from the garage, then opened the basement door. The air below was cold and damp with that familiar moldy smell. I swept the beam around, calling out, "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence. Nothing. Just the usual scent of wet earth. I figured maybe the wind had pushed open the small basement window near the ceiling. I meant to fix it, but had been putting it off. Back in bed, I told my wife, it was probably just the wind. "Tomorrow, I'll buy a mouse trap." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't sleeping well. She tossed and turned all night. The next morning, things started getting strange. My daughter woke up early and ran into the kitchen yelling, "Dad, someone moved my toys." I was making coffee when I turned and saw her holding her favorite doll, frowning. She said she'd left the doll on the kitchen table the night before, but now it was on the floor and it had dried mud on it. I crouched down and saw it. Sure enough, there was dirt, like someone had brought it in from outside. Then my daughter pointed at the floor. "Dad, look. The floor's dirty." There were faint muddy footprints, blurry, but clearly from an adult-sized shoe, too big to be a child's. My wife came into the kitchen just then, pale-faced. "Honey, someone was definitely in the house last night." I tried to stay calm, wiped the floor clean, but my mind was racing. There was no sign of forced entry, doors locked, no broken windows, but what about the basement? I went down to check again, and this time I noticed the small window was slightly ajar, as if pushed open from the outside. My heart pounded, but I told myself maybe the wind had done it again. All day at work, I couldn't focus, haunted by the noises and the mud. That evening, we decided to check the security footage. Our cheap system recorded 24/7, but only stored 7 days of video. My wife and I sat on the couch after the kids were asleep, opened the app on my phone, and started rewinding the previous night's footage. At first, nothing seemed unusual at the front door or hallway. But when we switched to the kitchen camera, around 2 a.m., my heart stopped. The basement door slowly opened, and a strange man stepped up thin, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low, face hidden. He walked straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a cheese sandwich and a carton of milk, and ate greedily right there. Then he wiped his mouth, looked around, and went upstairs. The hallway camera showed him standing outside our bedroom door, just staring through the crack for several minutes. Then he went into my daughter's room, stood watching her sleep, and even touched her toys on the table, moving them slightly. After that, he returned to the kitchen, wiped the muddy footprints carelessly, and disappeared back into the basement through the window. My wife burst into tears, clinging to me. "Oh my God, he was in our daughter's room. How did we not hear him?" I was shaking as I called the police immediately, even though it was late. 2 officers arrived, watched the footage, and their faces turned serious. They went down to the basement and found similar muddy footprints. On the fridge, they found a clear fingerprint. Apparently, he forgot to wipe it. We told them everything, the noises, the mud, the toys moved, and they promised to investigate. They collected the fingerprint, reviewed the footage, and assured us they'd increase patrols in the area. That night, we didn't sleep. We brought the kids into our room, locked the door tightly, and stayed awake the whole night. The next morning, the police called back. They'd matched the fingerprint to a homeless man, didn't give us his name, but said he was a known drifter in the area with a history of breaking into abandoned houses to shelter. He'd been arrested in a nearby park and admitted to sneaking into our basement for 3 nights straight during heavy rain, hungry and desperate for food. But the most horrifying part? He hadn't just stolen food. Police found small items from our house in his pocket, a hair clip belonging to my daughter, and he said, "I just wanted to see what a family's life was like." Thankfully, he hadn't harmed anyone, but the thought of him standing there watching us sleep, touching my daughter's belongings, made me physically sick. The police said this was the 3rd break-in in our neighborhood linked to him, but this time with solid evidence, he'd be going to prison. After that, we sold the house and moved into a safer apartment, installed more cameras everywhere, and even hired a security guard to patrol for a few weeks. My wife struggled with insomnia for months, jumping at every little sound. My daughter became afraid of the dark, needing the light on to sleep, constantly asking, "Dad, is someone going to come into our house again?" I became obsessive, checking windows and locks every night, even though our new place had no basement. Sometimes I lie awake thinking, what if we hadn't had cameras? What if my daughter hadn't noticed her toy moved? How long would we have lived with him in our home? What might he have done next? Now, over a year later, we're doing better, but the memory still haunts us. If you have an old house with a basement, lock that window tight and install cameras. Don't ignore strange noises, because it might not be a mouse. We became much more security conscious after that. I clearly remember the 3rd night before we checked the footage. My wife was so anxious she couldn't eat dinner, hugging our daughter the whole time. My daughter, meanwhile, was carefree, playing with her toys as usual, but when she saw the mud on her doll, she burst into tears, convinced a ghost had done it. I comforted her, but inside, I was terrified. When we watched the footage and saw him standing over her bed, watching her sleep, I wanted to punch the screen. He moved so quietly, so familiarly, opening the fridge without a sound, eating, then wiping his mouth with our own paper towel. The police said he'd entered through the basement window because it was loose and likely had been watching our house for days before acting. The investigation lasted a few days. Police collected DNA from the mud traces and matched it to the man. He was homeless, had lost his job due to addiction, and had drifted into town from another city. He wasn't carrying a weapon, but officers found a small knife in his pocket, which chilled us to the bone. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for burglary and theft, but for us, the emotional damage was far greater. My wife started seeing a therapist to manage her anxiety. I joined the neighborhood security group and began warning neighbors to check their homes. My daughter is older now, but she still fears basements in any house we visit. We've told this story to friends, and they're horrified. Many of them have since upgraded their own security systems. I'm a 25-year-old woman, and this happened back in the summer of 2023, a night I'll never forget. I was living in rural Ohio, working as a server at a diner, just trying to save up enough to move to a bigger city. Life was quiet, boring even work, home, repeat. I drove a beat-up old sedan, nothing fancy, but it got me around. That night, I was coming off a late shift, bone-tired, and my gas tank was nearly empty. It was around 10 p.m., pitch dark except for the occasional streetlight, and I pulled into this small gas station off a lonely highway. It was one of those rundown places, flickering neon sign. Only one other car parked way off in the shadows. The kind of spot you don't think twice about during the day, but feels creepy as hell at night. I parked at the pump, grabbed my purse, and went inside to pay. The clerk was this bored-looking guy, scrolling on his phone, barely glancing up as I handed him a 20 for gas and a soda. I noticed the place was dead quiet. No other customers, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of a fridge in the back. Took maybe 5 minutes, tops. I didn't see anyone else around, didn't hear anything weird. Just got my change and headed back to the car. Pumped the gas, got in, locked the doors out of habit, and started the engine. I was texting my roommate to say I'd be home soon, not paying much attention, just ready to crash in bed. As I pulled onto the highway, the road was empty, just my headlights cutting through the dark. I'd been driving maybe 10 minutes, sipping my soda, radio on low, when I heard it, a rustle from the back seat. At first, I thought something slid around, maybe my work apron or a water bottle. But then there was this slow creak, like someone shifting their weight. My heart skipped, and I glanced in the rearview mirror. That's when I saw him. A man, sitting up in my back seat, his face half lit by the glow of passing streetlights. He was scruffy, maybe 30s, with a hood pulled up and these cold, wide eyes staring right at me. Before I could scream, he leaned forward quick, pressed a knife against my neck, cold metal biting into my skin, and growled, "Keep driving. Don't stop, don't scream, or I cut you." I froze, hands shaking on the wheel. My breath all shallow, like I couldn't get air. "Please take the car, my purse, whatever, just don't hurt me," I stammered, voice cracking. He didn't care, just snapped, "Shut up and turn left up ahead. There's a dirt road. You're driving there now." The knife pressed harder, and I felt a sting, like he nicked my skin. I was crying, trying to stay calm, but my mind was racing. How'd he get in? I locked the doors, didn't I? Later, cops said he probably jimmied the back door while I was inside paying, slipped in quiet as a ghost. But in that moment, I was just trying not to crash from panic. I turned onto the dirt road like he said, my car bouncing over ruts, trees closing in on both sides. It was leading nowhere good, deep into the woods, no houses, no lights. He kept muttering, "Faster, keep going," knife still at my neck. I begged again, "Please, I got nothing worth taking, just let me go." But he laughed, this low, nasty sound, and said, "You'll see where we're going soon enough." I thought about every horror story I'd ever heard, girls taken, never seen again, and I knew I had to do something, anything to get out of this. Up ahead, I saw a faint glow, a single streetlight on a curve, one of those old ones by a utility pole, probably left over from some abandoned lot. It was my only shot. My hands were sweaty, slipping on the wheel, but I gripped hard and started speeding up, acting like I was following his orders. He didn't notice at first, too busy looking out the window, probably thinking he had me under control. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think, but I focused on that pole. I whispered to myself, "You got this, just do it," and then I floored it, yanked the wheel, and aimed straight for the pole. The crash was deafening, metal crunching, glass shattering, airbags exploding in my face like a punch. My chest hurt like hell, my ears were ringing, but I was alive. I heard him curse, scrambling in the back, the knife gone from my neck. The airbag had knocked him back, and the car was a wreck, but crumpled, smoke hissing out. I screamed, "Help! Somebody help!" even though I knew no one was close. Through the cracked windshield, I saw him stumble out the back door, blood on his face, clutching his arm like it was broken. He took one look at the wreck, then bolted into the trees, limping but fast. I fumbled for my phone, hand shaking so bad I could barely dial 911. Told them I'd crashed, someone attacked me, please come quick. Cops and an ambulance got there in maybe 15 minutes, felt like forever. I was bruised, had a cut on my neck, but nothing serious. The airbag saved my life, probably. The car was totaled, front end smashed, but that crash got attention. A passing trucker saw the wreck and called it in two. Cops searched the area, found blood on the ground where he'd run, and tracked it to a nearby trailer park. They caught him that same night, hiding in a shed, still bleeding from the crash. Guy was a drifter, history of assaults, no fixed address. When they questioned him, he admitted he'd been watching me for days, knew my work schedule from seeing me at the diner. Said he saw me stop at the gas station before, figured it was an easy hit, steal my car, maybe worse. Didn't say what, but his smirk made my skin crawl when I heard about it later. They found a knife in the woods, matched his prints, and the blood in my car sealed it. He's locked up now. Got a few years for attempted robbery and assault, but it doesn't erase the terror.